Guruve Gauri Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dhanyavad, devotees. So, yesterday I had started, as I mentioned, and I first of all apologize that the audio was very low in the beginning yesterday. I was trying to not speak so loudly because I want to kind of save my voice, because of course today is Lalita Saptami, by the way, so Jai all glories to Shri Lalita Sakhi, but also tomorrow's Radhastami obviously, and there'll be the serving of Harikatha tomorrow. So I was trying to not speak so loudly so that I could kind of keep my voice intact. But naturally everyone, you know, when you're serving Harikatha, excitement comes and so forth and so on. But I just apologize that in the beginning yesterday, the volume was a little bit low. So as I mentioned yesterday, I'm trying to, in very incremental stages, just give a understanding of the fact, as the title mentions, there is more than one angle of vision on the Svarupa of the Jiva. And our acharyas have also presented different angles of vision on the Svarupa of the Jiva. And those angles of vision, they are complementary in many ways, and they're not contradictory. So it's a matter of reconciling. As I quoted a verse on an earlier post, that whenever there are two apparent contradictory statements, then one should not neglect one in favor of the other, but rather one should try to understand how they can be reconciled. So for many years now, I took these statements of my Guru Parapadma, Nityaleda Pravishtom Vishnu Paraparamhamsa, Astotara Sattasi Sriman, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, as well as my Shiksha Gurus and our Guru Vargas, and try to digest in a way how to reconcile and create a consistency of line of thought in the words that are spoken both by my Guru Parapadma, our Srila Prabhupada, other contemporary acharyas, as well as our Purva acharyas. So in order to do that, it does take some time, some study, some willingness to look at everything from the angle of reconciliation and not competition. So it requires both the energy of willing to be able to do the investigation, and also it requires the energy of looking for reconciliation. If either one of those two things are not there, then the tendency may be to get a partial understanding or a myopic view of what I understood, and make that myopic view a standard. And by making it a standard, it will not accommodate the fact that there may be other angles of vision. So that has proven to be problematic in many institutions. And I'm not going to go down trying to delineate what happened in what institution and so forth. But having seen some of the effects of that in my Guru Parapadma Sangha, to some degree, I thought it important to be able to share some insights into how the various angles of vision can both be accommodated. So yesterday I spoke about the fact that there are ways to look at the Svarupa of the Jiva, and particularly the teachings that have been given by our Guru Parapadma and other contemporary acharyas regarding this, in such a way as to understand the way they have spoken it, especially the use of many of the English words that are used in translation, to understand a different angle of vision. So, for instance, I had mentioned that where words like constitution, unmanifest, dormant, latency, potency, where these words have been used, we can try to, first of all, understand the application that was intended by Srila Gurudev, by our contemporary acharyas, and then apply that to perhaps get a different angle of vision. So I'm giving an example because maybe it's not as clear. I'm certainly feeling like I'm not being as clear. But in the word constitution, I mentioned yesterday, there are several definitions in the English dictionary as to what constitution can mean. It can certainly mean the composition of something. It could also mean a document, a constitution, like something that's set up as a constitution, right, in terms of a written document that guides things. But of course, obviously, we're not talking about that. So constitution here, if it means the composition of something, then we have to step back and start to look at certain things and see, well, will this all line up? As we mentioned yesterday, when we speak about Bhakti, the Sthayi Bhav, which is the first element in producing the rasa of a jiva, the rasa of a jiva itself, the siddha deha of a jiva. When we speak about these things, we're speaking about things that are composed of the substance called Svarupa Shakti. So if we speak of constitution as the composition of something, and we say that these things are inherent in the constitution of the jiva, meaning their constitution, then we may run into the difficulty of trying to explain how something which is composed of the Lord's internal energy could be present and be covered by the external energy. Very nicely yesterday, one devotee, because I'd asked this question several times, if there is the presence of the siddha deha, ra, sthayi bhav, etc., inherently present in the jiva, and understanding it can't be in their constitution because it can't be covered by Maya, what is the substance that it's composed of? Because when you look in the dictionary at the word, for instance, potency, it speaks to something that has the power to create an outcome. I think I went over this yesterday. So the power to create an outcome has been described in two ways. One is potential. Potential is something that, though it's not a substance, it is has the power to create an outcome. The second part of the definition in the dictionary was an actual substance, and the example was given of medicine. Different kinds of medicine, whether it's a botanical combination or a chemical combination, there is a potency in that botanical or chemical composition to effect the outcome, for instance, of curing a disease. So now you have two definitions of potency. One, potential, which is not necessarily a substance, right? But it has a potency. And you have a medicine, which is an actual substance. So my question was, which is it that we're describing that the inherency of the siddha deha, ras, etc., which one of those two is it? Is it potential, which means it doesn't necessarily have to have a substantive thing, because potential has the power to create an outcome. In this case, the outcome would be to realize a siddha deha, a ras, a sthayi bhav, etc., or is it a substance? So after asking the question several times, there wasn't a reply. One devotee wrote me back and said they inquired from someone else, and they got the answer that actually the substance, and I correct me if I'm wrong, if the person hears this, and I did not understand what you wrote, then please correct it. They said that the substance is Svarupa Shakti, and that it is not the Svarupa Shakti that is covered, but it is the knowledge of the the soul. In other words, like Jiva Goswami has written in Paramatma Sandarbha, Maya Avrita Svarupa Jnananam, that Maya covers the knowledge of the Jiva's Swarup. So the Jiva cannot understand their Swarup. Because of the influence of Avidya or Maya, the knowledge of their Swarup is covered. Now, they then went on to give an example that just like the sun is present in the sky, but clouds may come and the clouds may cover those who are below the clouds, but it doesn't cover the sun, right? Because the sun is not covered, but only those who are below the clouds. So the cloud is covering them. So I also spoke yesterday, I believe, that the nature of Swarup Shakti is such that its potency is revelatory. It means it reveals, when it's present, it reveals things. So if Swarup Shakti is present, even if the knowledge of the Jiva's Swarup is covered, right? Not the knowledge, not the Swarup itself, but the knowledge of the Swarup is covered, the presence of Swarup Shakti will remove that ignorance. That's what Swarup Shakti does. So again, as yesterday, I want to kind of refer directly to Sastra Praman for these things, because I don't want it to be that this is like an idea I have and not be able to back it by Sastra. So in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami Pad, he's described the function of Swarup Shakti. So he's describing its descent, because he's already quoted the verse, Sudha Sattva Viseshatma Prem Sridamsa Samyabhak Ruchi Bis Chittamasrinya Kiraso Babu Chitte. So now he's describing the nature of what happens when Swarup Shakti descends, or when it's present, right? So he says, Avirbu Yamanovrito Prajanti Tat Swarupata. So first, there's a very interesting beginning. Avir Bhuya. So Avir means like the descent, right? So the descent of something. Avir Bhuya Manovrito. When Swarup Shakti descends, and the reason that descent is mentioned here, and I'll read from Srila Gurudev in a minute to describe why Rupa Goswami's used the word descent, right? When it descends, it comes onto the chitta of the jiva. So manovritti really means the chitta, right? It comes onto the chitta of the jiva, and vrajante tatsarupatam completely becomes one with and takes over the functions of the chitta. So when Swarup Shakti is present, when it descends, it actually takes over the functions of the chitta. So if the chitta was covered by Maya, right? The chitta of the jiva, the knowledge of the jiva, Swarup, etc. was covered by Maya. With the presence of Swarup Shakti, it takes over the functions of the chitta. Then, Swayam Prakash. The nature of Swarup Shakti is that it is Swayam Prakash. It is self-revealing. So this was my point. It is revelatory in nature. So when Swarup Shakti is present, it has the characteristics Swayam Prakash. It is self-revealing. It reveals itself. So they also gave the example that the Swarup Shakti remains avyakta, means unmanifest to the jiva. That could be said like that, right? And they also gave the example that like the super soul is also present with the jiva, but avyakta. But in the case of the jiva, in the case of the super soul, it's clearly mentioned, Naham Prakasha Savasha Yog Maya Samamvrita, that Krishna reserves the right to reveal himself or not. So though the super soul is present, it is not axiomatic that the super soul has to be revealed to the jiva. Now we could say, well, isn't that the same thing about Swarup Shakti? Well, here would have more of a difficult time saying that, because Swarup Shakti is what is used to reveal Krishna. You understand? It's the very energy that is brought to reveal Krishna. So if Krishna is saying, Nam Prakasha Sarvasha Yog Maya Samavrita, I reserve the right to be covered by Yog Maya, right? Or Mahamaya in the case of the Jivas, and not to be revealed to them, the mechanism for revelation is Swarup Shakti. So let's go on to read, so this will become more clear. So it says, Avirpa Yamanovrito Vajante Tat Sarupatam. Swayam Prakash, it is self-revealing. Rupa Api, the nature of it is self-revealing. However, Api, Basamana Prakashavad. When it is present, or when it descends, it appears like it came from the Jiva. It appears like it came from the mind. So here, Rupa Goswami's, and I'm open to hearing correction. I'll read the commentary as well here. But here it's saying, Basa Mana Prakashavad. Though Swarup Shakti is itself self-revealing, that's its nature. It reveals Bhagavan. We'll see that in the next part of the verse, right? But even though it is self-revealing, when it descends on the Chitta, Basa Mana Prakashava, it appears like it came from the Chitta. But actually it is self-revealing. Then, Vastuta Swayamashwada. So, Vastuta means like the reality of something. The Vastu of this thing is that the nature of Swarup Shakti is also Swayam Ashwadam. Why? Because the Swarup Shakti is primarily, especially in the verse Sudasattva Viseshatma, is composed of two elements, Samvit and Aladini. So the first part of the verse speaks to Samvit Shakti, the self-revealing potency, right, that descends on the Chitta, along with the Ladini potency, which is Swayam Ashwada. In other words, Swayam Aswada. It is self-tasting. The Swarup Shakti reveals itself, and it is the cause of tasting. Right? So we're going to go ahead and read that. Swarupa eva ratis tuaso. Then, Krishna adi kamakakshwada hetu tvam pratipajite. So let me read the translation. Appearing in the mental functions, Bhav becomes the mental state itself. It becomes one with the Chitta. Right? So it takes over the Chitta. Right? This Bhav is self-revealing. This Bhav is self-revealing. It appears to become manifest by the mind. It appears to become manifest by the mind. Though in its essential nature, Bhav is taste itself, it also acts as the cause of tasting the pastimes of Krishna, his associates, etc. So here, Rupa Goswami Pad himself has described the nature of the descent of Swarup Shakti. Now, it could be said, the Swarup Shakti is present, but it hasn't descended. So now, the question will come, well, if it's awaiting descent, is it present in the Bhada Jiva? If it's awaiting descent, if Swarup Shakti is awaiting descent, then is it present in the Bhada Jiva? So now, before I read the explanation that's given here in the commentary by Jiva Goswami Pad, let me go to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu, and this is on page 24, Srila Gurudev's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu. And Srila Gurudev himself is describing the nature of Nitya Siddha Bhav. When there's a Nitya Siddha Bhav, from the verse Kriti Sajya, Bhavet Sajya, Bhavasa Saranamida, Nitya Siddha Shabhavasha, Prakritam Ridi Sajjata, he's describing what is that Nitya Siddha Bhav. So this is on page 24. And he's doing this in answer to a doubt that's raised, right? Let me get to that part. So he says that essentially this Nitya Siddha Bhav is not created by sadhana. It's not that when we did sadhana, it created a Nitya Siddha Bhav. The Nitya Siddha Bhav is Nitya Siddha. It's eternally existent. So now Gurudev is going to describe where it exists and how it descends, just like in this verse Avir Bhuya. So he's going to describe that. This is due to the fact that Bhakti is a special function of Svarupa Shakti. Right? Oh, do I have the right page here? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Let me read it. It's on page 24 here. I'm sorry. The word Nitya Siddha has been used in this verse in order to dispel the doubt that I expressed earlier, that perhaps the Nitya Siddha Bhav is produced by sadhana. And if that's the case, then how can we say it's eternal? Because it was produced by sadhana. So he says in order to clear that doubt, the word Nitya Siddha is being described here. The word Nitya Siddha has been used in this verse in order to dispel this doubt. Bhav is an eternally accomplished phenomenon. Nitya Siddha. It always exists in the eternal associates, Nitya Parikars of Bhagavan. The Nitya Siddha Bhav manifests itself from the Lord's eternal associates into the heart of the purified Jiva. This is verified in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then he quotes the Bengali poem, the Bengali translation of the verse Kriti Sajja Bhavet Sajja in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Majalila 22:107. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sajja Kabunoi Shravanadi Sudha Chitte Karyoyidoi. He translates, Krishna Prema is an eternally established reality. It is not brought about by sadhana. It automatically manifests itself in the heart of purified by the performance of the various limbs of bhakti, such as Shravan, Kirtan, and so on. So Rupa Goswami Pad is writing here that the Svarupa Shakti, right, Samvit and Ladini, it descends, Avirabhu Yamanovrito takes over the chitta. Where did it descend from? Srila Gurudev is saying from the hearts of the Nitya Parikars of Bhagavan, right? So I'm only speaking this as understanding an angle of vision, right? I'm speaking this to understand an angle of vision on statements that Srila Gurudev has made, right? So this is a statement of Srila Gurudev here, right? So let me go to the commentary here. So I'm going to go to the part where he talks about the descent, right? Bear with me. Though this rati, this is the commentary of Jiva Goswami, though this rati is self-revealing, not depending on anything else, since it reveals Krishna and everything else by its mercy, it manifests within the functions of the mind of the Lord's dear devotees in this world, and then becomes one with their minds. It becomes their minds and their emotions. Tat Sarupatam Vrajanti. So he's describing how the descent of Svarupa Shakti works. He says when it does come, it is self-revealing. It reveals Krishna and everything else. That means that it reveals Krishna, your Swarup, meaning your Siddha Swarup, your Ras. It reveals everything else when it descends, right? It actually takes over the functions of the consciousness, the chitta, right? It appears, vasamana, in the mind as if by the actions of the mind, prakashavat, though it is self-revealing and independent. So he's explaining this word, vasamana prakashavat. It appears like it came from the chitta or the mind of the jiva. But actually it's self-revealing. It did not come from the mind of the jiva or the consciousness of the jiva. It is self-revealing. It is swata siddha, self-perfected, swayam ashwadan, self-tasting, and swayam prakash, self-revealing. It eternally exists in the hearts of the Nitya Parikars and descends avirgu yalmanovrito onto the chitta of the jivas in this world whose chitta has been purified by the performance of sadhana bhakti. So, this is one complete understanding of the angle of vision that does not necessarily align with the idea that there is a eternally existent, already established Bhav, Ras, Siddha Deha, everything present in potency somehow or another. I'm not sure still what potency means. If it's Swarup Shakti, as the devotee wrote me back to suggest, I presented my doubt about that, right? There could be other elements to that, so I'm not completely closed to hearing more detail of how that's understood. But from what we're reading here, the presence of Swarup Shakti has self-revealing potency. So when Swarup Shakti comes, it is the very thing that does reveal Bhagavan and reveals the Jivas, Ras, Bhav, Siddhadeha, etc., etc. Right? So I don't know how it would be present, but covered by, or not it being covered, but even the Jiva being covered. Because the idea is that when Swarup Shakti comes, it uncovers the Jiva. Another example, Swarup Shakti is present in its very, the influence of it, the prabhav of it is present in the very thin expression of Shraddha, even in the very beginning of devotional life. We have Ado Shraddha. Of course, Ado Shraddha means some prior contact with the prabhav or influence of a sadhu. Then one comes into the actual stage of Shraddha. And then again, Shraddha deposited in the actual association of a sadhu. So now, what does Shraddha mean? Even when Shraddha has come in its first form, before it grows to Paramartik Shraddha, which is Shraddha Shabde Vishwashake Shujada Nishchaya, Krishna Bhakti Koili Savakam Kritoy. When Shraddha unfolds into its highest state, it is like pure bhakti. It is pure bhakti, right? In its early manifestation as an influence of Swarup Shakti, it does an amazing thing. In the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 11:22:10, there is a verse there that describes the nature of the Jiva's sojourn in the material world and their relationship with avidya, or ignorance, right? Anadi avidya yukta sha purushasha veda atmanam. This third line is so important. Swato na sambhavanti anya. Swato na means, sambhavanti means, because the Jiva's connection with avidya, and the one function of avidya is called abhinivesh. It means that the Jiva's connection with avidya is so entangling, swato na sambhavanti. The Jiva on their own cannot extricate themselves from abhinivesh of avidya. It is such a deep control by the avidya Shakti, the Jiva cannot by his own power extricate himself. Anya, it requires another person. The other person must be Gyanada. Gyanatva, Gyanadobhavet. Gyanatva, Gyanadobhavet. So Gyanatva means who has realized Swarup Shakti, or have realized, maybe they did not realize Swarup Shakti, but they realized the spiritual substance, right? Chitvastu, right? Only one of those kinds of persons can give you the gyan to break the abhinivesh of avidya. So staying in the context of bhakti here, Gyanatva Ganadobhavet will mean a sadhu who is imbued with Swarup Shakti. Now, when the sadhu gives faith, right, because that's the first thing that manifests, Shraddha, right? What is the nature of that Shraddha? Shraddha anupayani brajam bhakti unmukhi chitta vritti visesh. Even this small influence of Swarup Shakti, which manifests as Shraddha, has the power that we have not had from time without beginning. What power? It can break the abhinivesh of avidya and bhakti unmukhi chitta vritti visesh, turn the chitta vrittis, that means the functions of the chitta, toward the service of Bhagavan. So even a small prabhav of Swarup Shakti in the form of Shraddha has the power to break abhinivesh and turn the jiva towards the service of Bhagavan. What to speak of the full-blown manifestation of Swarup Shakti, which reveals Krishna, the jiva, their relationship, the dham, etc., etc., etc. Right? So this is one thing. Now, in this same line of thought, if we ascribe that every single person, every jiva, because this is what has been put out. Now, I don't think my Guru Maharaj has directly spoken it like this either, even though let me get to the point here first. The idea is that every single jiva in the material world, every bada jiva, has in their soul or in their constitution, and here the word constitution means in their makeup, all of the elements of perfection, right? A sthaya bhav, a ras, a siddha, everything is there, and it's there in, again, I don't know what the substance of the potency is. If it's potential, everything is solved, right? But that's present there inside the jiva, and when the avidya Shakti, which has produced a subtle and gross body, is removed, it will reveal that ras, siddha, deha, everything. So, that rasa, that siddha, deha, that sthaya bhav is already fixed in the bhada jiva right now, and when they unfold in bhakti, it will manifest what is already fixed as a ras in the jiva right now, right? So that's the way I've heard it. If I'm not, then please correct it in the comments, right? So now I want to go also to another Mool Sastra, right? Translated under the guidance of our Guru Dev, and try to understand or try to reconcile something. Because if every jiva has a fixed rasa already present, and it only requires the removal of the influence of avidya in the form of a gross and subtle body, and that pure spiritual body, etc., will be revealed, I'm trying to understand Sanatana Goswami Pad's statements here. So, let me get to them. So this comes in the second canto of Brihad Bhagavatamrita in the chapter Jnanam, and it's verse 188. Muktao swatatva jnanena maya apagamato hi saha nivartate ganananda brahma, I can't see here clearly, brahmanam anubhavo bhavet. So, here it says, when the jiva obtains liberation by knowledge of his true identity, his illusion about his connection with the material world is eradicated. So here we have the statement that actually when the jiva becomes liberated, right, free from any avidya, and the material connection is eradicated, Sanatana Goswami Pad says, at that time he experiences that he is a particle of the all-blissful Brahman. He doesn't mention here that by the eradication of the Maya Shakti or Vidya Shakti, that he realizes himself to be a cowherd boy or any other Nityasila Rasa which was established in his soul. Because now he's realizing the soul. That's what's here. He's eradicated Maya. At that time he experiences himself as a particle of Brahman. Let me read Sanatana Goswami Pad's Tika, Digdarshani Tika. The Bhakti Sastras say, one attains liberation by realizing his true identity as pure spirit. This knowledge puts an end to the delusion that is forgetfulness of his real nature, and frees one from the illusion of Maya. So here we have all the criteria that would be necessary to realize that already established Ras, Siddha, Deha, all the criteria we needed to get there, we have it, right? He then experiences, I am a part, Angsa, of the supreme spiritual entity, Pada Brahmana Bhagavan, who is by nature all blissful. Now, Sanatana Goswami says, one should understand that the conception expressed here is that Brahman and Bhagavan are one. So he's not suggesting that he does not have real footing in the spiritual dimension, because he's realizing that Brahman and Bhagavan are one. However, when one attains liberation by just realizing the identity of the soul, this is incredible. Because from what is being espoused, if you just realize the soul, intrinsic in the soul, is all of the things, the Siddhadeha, the Ras, the everything. Here Sanatana Goswami Pad is saying, however, when one attains liberation by realizing the identity of the soul, myself, in other words, he's saying when you realize yourself is indeed a part of the Lord, the happiness he experiences is only partial. The happiness experienced there is only partial. Although, now he describes a difference between what is realized by the descent of Svarupa Shakti coming from Bhaktas. Although Bhaktas are also part of Parabrahman or Bhagavan, because we know Jiva Goswami Prabhu has said, Paramatmaika Seshitva Svabhav. That is our nature. We're part of Paramatma, right? Although Bhaktas are also part of Parabrahma or Bhagavan, by their bhajan, or serving the Lord in love, they achieve divine happiness, bhakti sukha, by experiencing the unlimited sweetness of his lotus feet. This is how devotees of the Lord are distinctly superior to those who are merely liberated. So liberation from Maya is not an axiomatic or automatic thing that produces realization of a Siddhadeha or Ras, etc., etc. It requires Svarupa Shakti. Now, if that Svarupa Shakti is there in the soul, then according to Sanatana Goswami Pad, when Maya is eradicated and a person realizes himself to be the soul, he should realize, I am a cowherd boy, I am industrial Ras in Vaikuntha, that should be there. But he doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. Let me go on to the next verse. Shradana anurupam hifalam shravanam siddhyati atta swarup jnanena sajje mokshe alpakam phalam. It is seen everywhere that one obtains a result according to the practice he adopts to achieve it. Thus, the liberation that is attained by understanding one's spiritual nature affords meager happiness. So, a practice that does not include invoking the descent of Svarupa Shakti, right? Because the first thing was to establish that simply removal of the form of, removing Maya Shakti or Vijaya Shakti and the gross and subtle body does not axiomatically or automatically reveal a Ras with Krishna. That was the first point. The second point here is that it requires, which is what Srila Gurudev clearly mentions in so many lectures, right? That it requires that in the practice of bhakti, a level of maturation will come in which the perception of Svarupa Shakti becomes clear. He described that two different ways. Once he's described, and they're the same actually in one sense, he described in the stage of Ruchi going into a Shakti, which is the same thing Jiva Goswami Pad describes, then the Ras of the Jiva becomes fixed because the Abbas of an eternal associate appears on the Chitta. Not Suddha Sattva Visesha, not the full crystallization of Svarupa Shakti, but the Abbas of it appears on the Chitta and solidifies a fixed relationship, right? In other words, it establishes, I want to serve like this parikar. So Gurudev described this in several lectures, but one is in Venezuela, and the title of the lecture is Svarupa of the Jiva. He also mentions all the same things that he's always mentioned in his lectures, but here he particularly points out what is the nature of sadhakas, because he first talks about siddhas, right? And it's an important thing to realize that we have to separate Nitya Siddhas from Sadhakas, right? And then also, there's some separation of Sadhakas from general masses of people, because those who've come to the position of sadhana have entered under the influence now of Swarupa Shakti. So what they're experiencing, what they're growing in, is not the same as the general populace, right? So, but everyone, general populace, everyone has the potential for bhakti. Everyone has that. Everyone has the potential for a particular relationship in bhakti, right? So, here on this class in Venezuela, Gurudev mentions these two things: mature and immature lobe, or greed, or ruchi. He says when it becomes mature, it cannot be changed. Another example of this is one of our sannyasis, very wonderful sannyasi, I have great respect for him as well. He does a lot of traveling, a lot of preaching, and he's also very inspirational to me personally, because when I went to preach in Africa several years ago, he gave me his blessings and he gave me very good encouragement. But he asked Srila Gurudev in front of my house. Srila Gurudev, when he stayed here in Alachua, he would come to my home to do darshans each day, and he was staying just across the street, and he would walk up and down the road in front of our house here every morning. So on one of those morning walks, the sannyasi asked Srila Gurudev, "Oh, Srila Gurudev, can the Svarupa of the Bhada Jiva be changed?" Gurudev's answer was the Bhada Jiva has not realized any Svarupa. So this was really interesting, because it was one of the things that long ago piqued my curiosity. Because if the Jiva Svarupa is present and it is fixed, then the answer Srila Gurudev would have given would have been, no, it cannot be changed. Because whether you realized it or not, it's there and it can't be changed. Right? But he said first, the Bhada Jiva has not realized any Svarupa. So what would it matter if the Svarupa is present and fixed, predetermined? What would it matter whether you realized it or not? The answer would still be, no, it can't be changed because it's fixed. But Srila Gurudev said, no, he's not realized any Svarupa yet. Then Srila Gurudev went on to say, well, that person, if they come in contact with someone in Dasyaras, they may be affected by that because their own maturation has not yet come to the point where their rus is fixed. Right? It doesn't mean, and I'm going to give an explanation which is from another angle of vision in a minute, but Gurudev says when they will become mature, and Gurudev here indicated the state of rati, bhav, then their rasa will be revealed and it will be fixed. But Gurudev, apparently on other occasions, has said that the rasa is already there in the Bhada Jiva right from the beginning, and it is established and it is fixed. So how do we understand that? How do we understand those two things? Right? Then Gurudev also had said in that same conversation, he said even if a person, right, is doing sadhana, and he's come under the influence of somebody who is doing, who's influencing Madhurya Rasa, but this person who's associating is really not in Madhurya Rasa, then it will not fructify Madhurya Rasa for them. So now his indication that, oh yes, the rasa is there and it's established and it's fixed. But here, I understood Gurudev to be saying, because he would never have quoted the idea that you have to first realize a Svarupa for it to matter, right? But here Gurudev is saying, when your perfection is attained, that perfection, and I'm going to speak from another angle of vision here, when the Jiva realizes their perfection, Srila Baladev Vijabhushan Prabhu in Vedanta Ratna, I'm trying to think of other sources, so many places, it's mentioned that realization is in Nitya Vatmanakal. It means that when I realize my perfection, it won't be date stamped, oh, this happened on September 16th, 2023. I wish, right? I wish, right? So, but It won't be date stamped like that. Right? When you realize your perfection, you realize it as an eternal reality in Nitya Vatmanakal, which means that there won't be a conception that I was never not this gopi, this cowherd boy, etc., etc. From that angle of vision of Nitya Vatmanakal, the Ras of the Jiva is established and fixed. But Srila Gurudev was very careful not to conflate the realization of the Jiva in Nitya Vatmanakal when they've obtained their perfection, and the Sadhaka now, who is under the influence of Prakat Kal, means material time, which has a past, present, and future. Therefore, he spoke to Maharaj, the Jiva has not realized any Svarupa yet. Because he's speaking, you have to be here now where you are. And right now, you've not realized the Svarupa. He wasn't talking directly to Maharaj. Maharaj may very well have realized. But he was talking in general. The Bala Jiva has not realized any Svarupa. That realization will come, as Jiva Goswami Pad says, coming into the stage of a Shakti. Tasha Tadrasa Surakaragabasa Sumalasita Ridoespati Kamani Sastari Shute Shu Ragatmakaya Bhakti Pratipati Shu Api Ruchi Jayate. It will come at the time when the Abbas of an eternal associate descends on the Chitta, and a Ruchi in that mode of service solidifies, I want to serve Krishna like that. Then Krishna grants, oh yes, you want to serve like this? The Bhakti Shakti grants the power to do bhajan exclusively in that mood. And then very quickly, because I told the other day that whenever you see the shadow of something, it means the substance that's casting shadows nearby. Srila Gurudev spoke this very same thing, I believe it was in Badger, because at the tape, it looks like the same tent and everything that Gurudev speaks in Badger. And he said, oh, you should know that when you reach the higher stage of Ruchi, oh, that Sudha Sattva, etc. is very close, very nearby. Right? So, very quickly after that stage, it will come Sudha Sattva Viseshatma, etc., as I just described earlier from Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Right? So, from the angle of vision of the Jiva's perfection in Nitya Vatmanakal, we can say the Jiva has an eternal Swarup, which is already fixed, which is already established, etc., etc. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because so much of this has been generated, and I read it for like, I don't know, the umpteenth time last night, just to be clear, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, perhaps first, but I think there might have been other mentions, I'm not sure, but in his commentary on Shishashtakam, the first verse, he mentions the Jiva having a spiritual body. But what's the context of his mentioning that? He's mentioning it in relation to glorifying the power of Harinam. He was not giving a dissertation on Jiva Tattva. He was saying that the nature of Harinam is such. Even one prayer Bhaktivinoda Thakur is after, remember what his prayer is. More Siddha Dea De Krishna Posera Kegia E Dera Kare Savanash. O Harinam, please bestow upon me my Siddha Deha and bring me near to Krishna and destroy this material body. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur had Paramartik Shraddha, high-class Shraddha, in the potency of Harinam to reveal everything. Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sava Shakti. It has the power to reveal everything. Also, I told before, historically, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was pushing back against the Jat Gosai, who made people believe the only way to get perfection in bhakti is to come to us and we give it to you. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, not only, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur prominently, especially in our line, revealed the fact that actually the potential to obtain perfection is in the Jiva. And the revelatory element that reveals that potential is Swarup Shakti. So then why is Sadhu-Sanga so important? Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula Hoy Sadhu-Sanga. Why is the genesis of Bhakti related to Sadhu-Sanga? Because Swarup Shakti in this world is in the heart of pure devotees or sadhus. Bhaktivinoda Thakur begins his Jiva Dharma by describing a liberated person, Sannyasi Thakur. He was in the past the fourth stage of sannyas, means Paramahamsa. He was realized. He realized his soul. He had realized, I'm not this body. I have nothing to do with the material world. But when he saw a Vaishnava, he realized there was some gap, some meagerness, some inefficiency, some insufficiency in his Ananda. Therefore, from seeing a Vaishnava, a Doshradha, he developed faith to go to the Vaishnavas. And then, of course, meeting Babaji Maharaj there, he took shelter. And because he was already a liberated soul, when Babaji was doing his internal meditation, he was in Antradasa, he called out to Sannyasi Thakur, oh, silence that monkey Kakati, you are Ramana Manjari. So he was able to, from the place of Nityavatmanakal, absorbed in Antradasha, identify the Swarup of Sannyasi Thakur. But what was Sannyasi Thakur's qualification? He was already free from the illusions of Maya. But prior to meeting Vaishnavas, he was void of Swarup Shakti, the full manifestation of Swarup Shakti. So he had some Ganananda, as expressed here by Sanatana Goswami. He was tasting the bliss of Brahman. He was not tasting the bliss of a Ross with Krishna, though he had all of his Maya and Avidya removed. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur starts his Jiva Dharma by establishing this fact. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Jiva Goswami Pad, Srila Gurudev, they are all in one accord. So it's been mentioned before about Drishtikon. My wife is coming to tell me to lower my voice. See, this is what happens when we get involved in Harikatha, right? So Drishtikon means various angles of vision. So from one Drishtikon, which means from the angle of observing the perfected state of a jiva, which our contemporary acharyas did when they would say, in your constitution, your perfection, you have a beautiful body, and you have a particular service, and you have a beautiful body composed of this or that. They're speaking from the point of Nityavatmanakal, your perfection. Now, we should not conjecture, oh, therefore my Gurudev, he saw my Sarupa in Nityavatmanakal and he's revealing it to me. Maybe at the time of Diksha, if your own maturation is like that, at that time Gurudev may do. But when Gurudev is speaking in general, they're speaking from the point of view of the fact that when the jiva's potential is realized, all of these things are there. In the same way that potential in a seed of a tree exists. And when that seed undergoes the process to make it manifest the tree, everything will be there. In the same way, the elements of Sarup Shakti are also present in the practice of Bhakti. You could see that in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in the Jiva Goswami's commentary on Kriti Sajja Bhavet Sajja. The chanting, the serving Thakurji, putting on, everything is imbued with some degree of Swarup Shakti. Right? Coming under the association of Vaishnava, which is why it's so important, is because they're imbued with Swarup Shakti. This is why it's essential. Sadhu-Sanga, Sadhu-Sanga, Savasastekoi, Lavamatra, Sadhu-Sanga, Saab Siddhi Hoy. Even minutes association with them is so powerful because they have Swarup Shakti. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, again, in Vaishnava Thakur, he reveals, Ekaki Amar Nahi Pai Bol, Harinam Sankirtan. Even having Harinam everything, I feel I have no strength. Krishna say to Ma, Krishna Diti Para, Tomara Sakati Ache, O Vaishnava Thakur, but you have Krishna and the ability to give him. Therefore, Ami tu Kangal, Krishna Krishna Boli, Daya Tava Pachi Pachi. Therefore, I'm running after you. This is the mood that a sadhak has. The sadhu has Swarup Shakti. So we're not saying, oh, the sadhu gives you your Ras. The sadhu gives Swarup Shakti. Swarup Shakti reveals your Ras. So hopefully this is clear. So, from the angle of vision of Prakat Kal as an aspirant or practitioner. Gurudev is described going through the phases of bhakti from Shraddha, Sadhu-Sanga, Bhajana Kriya, the removal of anarthas, coming into Nishti, coming into Rucha, in the mature stage of Ruchi. Then the Abbas of a eternal associate comes on the heart. Gurudev is also eternal associate, so if that is your mood, that mood will then settle on your heart. Then Swarup Shakti will come and crystallize that Ruchi you have and produce a body for you to realize that's composed of just being suitable to accommodate serving with that particular taste. You understand? So this is how the process works. If we start to conflate Prakat Kal and Nityavatmana Kal, we end up with all this confusion of trying to theologically define how elements of Swarup Shakti, the Ras and everything else of realized Swarup Shakti, is present now in a Bada Jiva. If we take the position of being in Prakat Kal as aspirants or practitioners or Sadhakas, then it makes sense that Swarup Shakti is unfolding in incremental stages and is realized in Rati. So I try to give both angles of vision, which is how it's reconciled. You understand? So the idea is only one angle of vision, it's my way or the highway, is first of all problematic because it creates too much dissent, division, in-group, out-group, anti-party, our party. So that's the first problem with it. Secondly, it's a breeding ground for aparad because it then suggests nobody else can have an understanding except if it's come through via my understanding of what Srila Gurudev said. That's also problematic. So I quoted from Srila Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Srila Rupa Goswami Pad, Srila Jiva Goswami Pad, Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad, right? And tried to demonstrate there is an alignment. There is an alignment between them all, and there are two angles of vision. So someone will not be wrong if they say from the angle of Nityavatmana Kal, yes, in my constitution, in my perfectional stage, all these things are there. Therefore, for those who say that bhakti is not inherent, they are not wrong. Because if they're suggesting that bhakti, meaning Swarup Shakti, is not inherent in the body of Jiva, they're completely correct. But if you were to ask them, oh, upon obtaining my constitutional position, now here constitution doesn't mean just realizing the soul, because we know that's not what reveals Radha and Krishna and Ras. But here, Gurudev would use the word constitution to refer to that stage in which your Siddha, Deha, and Ras and everything is perfected. So, or what you realize that perfection. So if you approach anyone that says bhakti is not inherent and you present it to them, when realization manifests and I'm in my constitutional position, meaning perfection, is my Siddha Deha there? Is a Ras with Krishna there? Is that Ras fixed? They will have to say yes. They will have to say yes. If I tell someone who says that, well, bhakti is not inherent in the jiva, right? I have not met that person, I hear this, who says nothing is there. I've not heard that from anyone. Because none of the acharyas, purvacharyas, say that. Jiva Goswami says there's 21 different things that are there, right? So I've not met anyone that says there's nothing there at all in the soul. Right? I have not met that. I don't know where that came from. I'm not sure the context of it even. But if someone says that there is not even potential for bhakti, then we'd have to challenge that. Because if you have no potential to obtain a perfection, then it doesn't matter what happens or what you do, you'd never obtain a perfection. So certainly potential for a particular perfected Ras is there. So if we understand Gurudev's statements to mean that in your constitution, in your perfection, everything is there. And right now, it is latent, dormant, unmanifest. If we understand all of these to be synonyms of potential to acquire that, then everything makes sense. if we suggest no, that, and there is, potentiality is something. It's not nothing, right? Like the potential in wood to create fire. If you put a fire on it, it'll burn because there's a potential for combustibility there. So potential is something. But if you try to make that something like something beyond potential or something like that, right? Or maybe we need to be clear about what potential is. Potential here doesn't mean like potential in the material world. That my 4-year-old will grow up to be a great scholar or a great athlete or something like that. Because the material world is relative and potentiality is not always fulfilled. But in spiritual life, things are absolute. And by the practice of Bhakti, Jiva Goswami says, I have to read that part here because it's very important. Let me hopefully get to that verse without taking too much time. If not, you can read it yourself. He mentions in the verse, Kriti Sajja Bhavet Sajja, he says in the commentary, certainly by the actions of Samvitaladini in the future, this Nityasudha Bhav will be accomplished. Certainly. So here potentiality is not relative, it's absolute. That when one comes in contact with Bhakti, certainly by that practice, in the future, the ascent of Samvitaladini will take place. How long it takes is up to us. But it will certainly take place. All right, I think that should be sufficient for today. Again, let me just summarize it. I tried to present both angles of vision, right? How it is that our Guru Pada Padma, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and others could say that there is a spiritual body present, etc., because they're relating it to Bhakti, right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not again giving a dissertation on Jiva Tattva, because in Jiva Dhamma clearly says that the Jivas lack Chit Bhav. They lack Swarup Shakti, right? But in glorification of the holy name, he says, Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vijavadu Jivanam, that the nature of Harinam is such that it is so wonderful that in the Jiva who accepts Harinam, it will produce a beautiful body, etc., which is already, he's saying like it's there, will be bought out by Harinam. Okay? All right, so Dandavat Pranam Vancha Kalpa Turubhishcha Kripa Shindavevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.